This morning, of course, our keynoter, as Neil just said, is a man who really doesn't need an introduction, so I'm not going to give him one, and that is Michael Eisner. Michael, would you join us? Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. You.
How are you?
I'm good.
Now, you've made a little news this morning. With
Inadvertently.
So do tell us about that and tell us why it's inadvertent.
Well, inadvertent is the timing, not inadvertent. Yeah, we've just been playing with the browser game area for some time, and Sean Fanning and Tornante have done a few things together. We had a success in a company called Rupture, which he then sold to EA. And he came in with a bunch of ideas, and one of the ideas he talked to us about was a game based on what we all live and breathe every day, which is Hollywood, and the whole idea of whether it's the music business or the television business or the movie business, which is where we're going to concentrate to begin with, the fun of whether you're a waiter trying to get a screen test, or a screen test trying to get in a horror movie, or a horror movie trying to meet somebody at a cocktail party, or trying to find your way into ICM or CAA, and trying to understand package commissions and what they aren't, and buying your way into a variety ad, and maybe taking a variety ad.
We love that.
And it's a game about the ultimate aspiration, the promise, the fantasy of coming to Hollywood and maybe not hitchhiking on Santa Monica Boulevard, but getting to the mailroom of William Morris. We spent a lot of time working on it. We're going to introduce it on November 1st. We have Sony as our launch sponsor, which we're excited about, because one thing that was fun was making up 100 movies, because I've done that for a while. But usually you have to shoot them. These we just made up 100 movies and trailers and log lines, and mixed in with 100 movies that are fantasy movies will be some real movies. So at our launch, Sony's Burlesque will be one of the real movies inside Fametown. And it'll give you a sense of potential before you even ask, potential monetization, just other ways to monetize this arena. So we're, it's trying to make these social games more fun. They're not just about the anxiety of getting your radish to grow, but they're about career and celebrity and, making sure you don't say the inappropriate thing to a policeman on Pacific Coast Highway, or any of the things that we read about in TMZ or Us Magazine, and then go all the way to the top, actually going from the D-list to the A-list. So we're doing it. We recognize that there are a lot of people out there working in this area. I'm hoping people have some respect and don't rip it off for the first 2 days, but we'll be there early.
So this is called Fametown, right?
Fametown.
And it's going to be, and it's a Facebook game.
It launches on Facebook.
Okay, so what's interesting, we've been talking to people about the enormous amounts of data that Facebook is gathering on consumers. And I'm just wondering what you see in the opportunities within social media and social gaming for entertainment companies that make content that isn't interactive. Movies, television, publishing.
I think these things survive in parallel worlds. If, for instance, this massive audience that we may attract learns about Burlesque, this particular movie that comes out in the fall from Sony, they would be more inclined to go see a sit back and enjoy movie, whether it's on mobile or in theaters or wherever it will end up being, than if they didn't know about it. So I think it's a way to find out about what's going on. Nothing is going to replace 2,000 years of storytelling. That's here, and that's exciting, and that's in movie theaters, and that's on Broadway, and that's at rock concerts and so forth. But there are other ways to entertain and other ways to distribute, and that's what is happening so rapidly today that I think for the content providers, the upside is even better than for the 1 in a million Googles or Facebooks that happen to hit.
You know, when you describe the game and you talk about essentially taking someone through a virtual entertainment career, and I don't know how accurate that can be, but it strikes me this is a potentially a very powerful education tool for anybody who's trying to change careers, trying to get into a competitive field. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, it can be as accurate or inaccurate as the world is itself. Mm-hmm. You have 30 paparazzis trying to run you over on Beverly Drive. That's part of the real world. You also have serious meetings going on at Fox and talent agencies about real projects and real business. So there's the fun of the glitz, and there's the seriousness of, you know, I was a page. Most of my friends were out here were, I was a page in New York. My friends out here were William Morris, my generation, William Morris mailroom. In Vugaru, you know, this is the company that we have that makes story-driven material directly for the net, at least in the US. And everybody was agonizing over how are you ever going to cast these things, and how are you going to deal with the unions, and how are you going to pay all this money that people are used to getting paid in cable and so forth. And the answer is probably 90% of every waiter in Los Angeles will do Hamlet's third soliloquy if you give them a big enough tip right there in the restaurant. So we've cast Vugaru with the most amazing talent, most of which are very accomplished college, high school, theater majors who are out here waiting table, like, you know, wasn't Gloria Swanson, Susan Hayward, who was, you know, and if Susan Hayward could be met at Schwab's, and you can get the right seat on Fametown by acquiring a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say bribing, but maybe you give a tip to the maitre d' and you get the right seat, and you're sitting next to Peter Chernin, maybe you end up getting a D-level role in some movie. I mean, all these things are the fun of creating this game. And because of Sean Fanning, who is quite a bright guy, and David Iannacci, who is the creative force, and others that are working on this, we're having a good time. We're playing the game as it's being developed.
Sean Fanning, if I'm not mistaken, is played by Justin Timberlake in The Social Network.
No.
No?
No, that's his...
The other Sean.
That's the other Sean. That's the bad Sean. That's how I look at it.
Evil Sean.
No, Sean is the one whose uncle insisted that it was only right that everybody get free music. He created the entire world of file sharing. His uncle set him off. He was like 18. They set him off in the wrong direction. And basically the courts closed him down. And he ended up with nothing. Except he's already come back and understands the legitimate world and is creative. And when we talked about this, he had a bunch of ideas because we liked being in business with him. And we kept coming back to this one because it just was going to be fun to work on.
Now, you also have a book out, and I've got a copy here, called Working Together, Why Great Partnerships Succeed. And in this book, you actually have a chapter about yourself and Frank Wells at Disney. And there's other parts of the book also touch on the entertainment industry. But I wanted to ask you about some aspects of these partnerships, because one thing I thought was interesting is frequently you're looking at people where the public perception is these people are radically different. And what you're finding is that they're not. I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit.
Well, some are and some aren't. They all share, as Warren Buffett, who I did Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger as a chapter, and he and everybody else concluded that the one thing you can't have with a really great long-term partnership is envy and jealousy. And he went through with me about the 7 deadly sins in quite detail, I must say. And he talked about gluttony, and he said, that's kind of fun. You really eat like a pig. You go to all the things I own, Dairy Queen or whatever they are. Then you feel not so great later. He said, lust, some advantages to lust, not good evening's entertainment. Later you may get yourself in a lot of trouble. He said, envy doesn't work from the first moment you feel it to the moment it destroys your relationships. So all these relationships, the people, whether it's Ron, whether it's Brian Grazer and Ronnie Howard together as a producer and a director, who have worked for 30 years and done great Academy Award-winning films, they're not jealous of each other. And they made a deal that was 50-50. Actually, when Brian said to Ronnie, because Ryan was a bit director by this time, you'll take 60 and I'll take 40 and we'll be fine. Ronnie's wife came back the next day and said to Ronnie, 50-50. And they forged a 50-50 deal, which seemed unfair to Ronnie Howard when it was made. And over the years, it's all worked out well, because there are years where Brian has gotten television shows on the air and stuff and been a bigger earner. So whether it's Howard and Glenn Grazer or Frank and me, or Buffett and Charlie Munger, or Bill Gates and his wife, or the guys that did Home Depot, or Joe Torre as a failed manager until Don Zimmer, a bench coach, came together with him at the Yankees, and then they won 4 out of 5 World Series in a row. This combination of 1 and 1 adding up to 3 is attractive to me. And some people have different skills, and some people have similar skills. Some people like Warren playing the banjo and being in the cover of Fortune, and some like Charlie in this particular relationship like being second fiddle, but they're very, very important to each other.
You have a chapter on yourself and Frank Wells, and I think that one of the things that's interesting is you talk about what a lot of people misconstrued about your relationship with Frank, and I'm wondering if you can tell us about that.
Well, everybody thought I was in the days that I had a lot of hair going in different directions, the crazy one, the wild ideas, had to be restrained, and that Frank was the Rhodes Scholar, Stanford graduate, pulled together, buttoned up executive who kept the business going. And in the book, we interviewed Sid Bass, who was a principal shareholder. And they said, is it true that Michael Eisner was crazy and Frank was sane? And Sid said, no, that's not true at all. They were both crazy. So, I was more holding Frank back probably than he was holding me back. I was probably more conservative than Frank. But the other thing I've talked about in this book is, when I worked for Barry Diller, he was the senior of the two of us. So I was particularly nuts, and I would come to him with all sorts of crazy ideas and wild notions and all sorts of things, some of which worked. And he was the more conservative one because he had the ultimate authority. When I went to Disney and I was the senior to Frank, I had the responsibility of making sure the place didn't go up in flames. So I became more conservative. Somehow the guy with a final say before he jumps off the bridge says, well, is this really the right thing to do? There are a few bridges I jumped off of, but by and large, we were pretty conservative.
Now, you also, of course, worked very closely with Jeffrey Katzenberg and then with Mike Ovitz. And the partnership with Jeffrey Katzenberg worked well for a while and then not so well. And with Mike Ovitz, it didn't work out as well at all. What was different about those? Why did the Katzenberg partnership fall apart, and why didn't the Ovitz partnership work?
Well, the Katzenberg partnership did not fall apart. The Katzenberg partnership, I was partnered with him for 16 years. For 15 years, 11 months, and 28 days, it was magic. And he is a great executive and never sleeps, has 2 or 3 breakfasts, 2 or 3 lunches, and I was able to be kind of an editor to this fantastic executive. When Frank died, the board, particularly Roy Disney, did not feel that Jeffrey was mature enough at that point to be the COO of the Disney company. And I told him he wasn't going to get it, and we picked somebody else. And rightly so, he was upset. And I think it worked out well, better for him than us, because he then was able to go be the senior partner in his new ventures and did very well. So that really was simply not a misunderstanding. It was a decision that was made by the company that he should not. Now, the mistake was, and maybe it was my mistake not having Frank saying, don't be a schmuck, I thought the arrangement when it came to an end was one thing, and he thought it was the other. And having never done well on the witness stand, he won. So that didn't look good, but the relationship was fine. As far as the other one you referred to, you know, it's a little bit like when, and I never believed this, ever. And there's no blame that you can place on anybody, but some women or men, they'll tell you in their first marriage, when this beautiful woman was walking down the aisle with her father next to her, and the guy says to you, this is after he's gotten divorced, you know, I knew at that moment, I knew it, and the momentum was moving, and I couldn't stop it, I couldn't get out of it. That was kind of what happened. It was just not meant to be between the two of us.
You know, you talk about the board not wanting to give Jeffrey that job at that moment. But this brings up something about the relationship of CEOs and their boards nowadays. I mean, how much clout can a CEO really have with the board? Could you have really, if you'd really wanted that to happen, could you have really pressed them to make that happen for Jeffrey?
Probably. But I wasn't going to take on, I didn't think they were wrong. Let's start there. It was a very volatile time. You know, it was Frank had just died. I had just had a serious heart operation. We weren't all acting on 8 cylinders. There was a lot of emotion involved, how things were handled. But I could just as easily write a chapter about the partnership between Jeffrey and me and the success of it as anybody else in the book.
Are you friendly today with him?
Well, I think he's still pissed off at me, but I certainly don't walk to the other side of the room when he comes into the room. Yeah, we speak. By the way, I am thrilled at how well he's doing. I mean, it's a little bit like, you know, I don't know how I'm going to get into this. I dated a girl, my wife's even here, in college who dumped me, right? So that was disturbing, as it is to anybody. And years later, I was writing this book, and I had a researcher. And the condition of the book, getting him to do it, was he had to go back to Ohio, because I wanted to find out what happened to this girl that dumped me. And my desire was, of course, that she was pumping gas and been married 72 times and really was upset that she dumped me. That was my deep desire. So he went, and he found out just the opposite. That she had married this guy, that she left me before they were still married, they had a great family, she had done fantastically, and the bottom line is, I was happy about that, because it showed me that I had good taste even then. Even though she thought I was a dork, I at least had good taste. So I'm happy that Jeffrey has done as well as he's done, because it does show that for 16 years, we were the right team.
Let's change gears a little bit. Before you mentioned storytelling, and I'll tell you that in my conversations around the business, there's a lot of grousing that the movie business in particular, not the TV business, which is sort of moving the other direction, but the movie business has given up on storytelling in favor of spectacle, visual effects, 3D, technical wizardry. Where do you see the business getting storytelling right and wrong, and how do you think that these technical changes in the business and the tools that are available are affecting storytelling?
My one comment is this is just deja vu. I mean, you can go through this kind. I'm not sure this hotel was here, but this conversation could have happened when 3D glasses came in, when Sensurround came in, when all the events came in, changed movies to make them more theatrical. Every change has improved the technical ability to make movies. And, you know, somebody makes Sound of Music, and then 8 studios make Paint Your Wagon and, like, you know, Star and all those big musical
Dr. Dolittle
flops that all happen. So, you know, everybody's kind of a lemming to a certain degree. So if something is a giant hit and they think it may be the technology or it may be the genre, then that genre or that technology overtakes the business. I do think 3D is real. I didn't go see Jackass 3D because I wasn't interested in Jackass. But $50 million on the weekend, there are a certain number of people that thought Jackass in 3D added a certain value. The theaters were able to charge a premium for that, but that is not the panacea. That is just enhanced technology. I mean, Avatar is a better movie because of the technology, but it would be no movie, obviously, without the story and the ethos and the parable and all the rest of it. So my view is everybody complains about the movie business, and then Easy Rider happens, and oh my God, you can make a small movie, or Shakespeare in Love happens, or Pretty Woman happens, or Grease happens. You never can make a musical. Musicals are dead, dead, dead. Then Grease happens. Musicals on television are disaster, cop rock, what an embarrassment, and then Glee happens. So it's just a lot of hype if everybody simply concentrated on character and emotion and whether people laugh or cry and do it technically in the best way. I'm dying to see a movie today in black and white that cost $8. I think that could be the next big blockbuster. Every movie doesn't have to be Superman or Batman or whatever.
Well, since you mentioned that, you know, one thing that doesn't seem to be tried very much is a sliding scale for ticket prices based on what the movie is. I mean, not all books are priced the same.
Well, that's because you are assuming that distributors know a good movie from a bad movie. And you're assuming that they could say, oh, they know 3D from not 3D. They know Censoron from not Censoron. They know 4,000 theaters from 2,000 theaters. So there you can do, but are they going to say that this director versus this director has made a better movie before the fact, and therefore I'm going to charge an extra 20%?
But you certainly know the difference between Avatar and The Hurt Locker in terms of what the two movies cost. You could say, well, that movie cost $250 million to produce, and that one cost $30 million to produce. We could charge more for the one that costs more to produce. But the movie business does not seem to have ever tried that.
I think you should not bring the audience into the cost of a movie. Every time the audience is brought into the cost of the movie, in my opinion, the movie suffers. The audience is not going because of the cost of the movie. They're going because of the story, of what they hear, of what their friends say to them. The cost of the movie is depending on the economic conditions of the time, can be damaging. If you go out and say, oh, we have the greatest movie, we spent, you know, $100 million, and this actor got $20 million, and this director got $2 million, and, you know, 20% of your audience is out of work, that would probably be a bad advertising campaign. So I think the movie business is a great business, and it's a great business the way sports is a great business. It's the only place where you can go without your parents and have an entertaining time. Because otherwise you're like stuck in your home or you're in a bus on mobile. To be in a place where there's a large audience and you're all reacting together is of value. It's just everybody can't make the same movie. That's boring. And making movies for less money, often you get a more creative movie. The director, the writers, they're forced to do things that money won't buy. So they're forced to be creative. So I am very high in the movie business, and the worse shape it's in, the better I like it. Because it's an opportunity.
In September at the 3D Entertainment Summit, one person on stage brought up something that I thought was interesting. He was talking about the cultural difference between Hollywood and Silicon Valley when it comes to failure. He said that in Hollywood, failure is like this disgrace that everybody tries to hide. Where in Silicon Valley, the venture capitalists who put up money assume that 9 out of the 10 things they're going to invest in are going to bust, but the 10th might be Google or Facebook. And that if you haven't got some bankruptcies on your resume, people don't feel you're taking enough chances. So I'm wondering where do you think our business, the entertainment business, could learn from that culture of risk-taking from Silicon Valley?
Well, I think that whoever said that should have a lobotomy. So I don't think that's accurate at all.
Okay.
The biggest venture business in the world is right here. My God, we write scripts, half of them are awful, we throw them away. We make pilots, half of them are awful, we throw them away. We make movies that don't open, they're bankrupt. All these companies are merging and going together and underdoing each other. I would say the king of bankruptcy and disappointment is right here in Hollywood. So if Silicon Valley wants to take that mantle, God bless them. But I think the entrepreneurship in the creative arts, whether it's visual arts and painters or musicians or Broadway shows or off-Broadway shows or television pilots or Vugaru or Fametown, which the odds are Fametown are going to fail, and it will be bankrupt as a little project. But there's a little piece in me that says, maybe, unless Playdom or Zynga rips us off in the next 2 weeks, which I hope they won't, because we'll do something maybe. But anyway, the most of these things fail, and we're used to it. I'm just not going to tell you my biggest failures, but we've all experienced them. The thing is, when you fail, you should fail in a financial box that's adjustable, that doesn't bring down the whole institution. You should have some fiscal responsibility in your bankruptcies.
Can you tell us a little bit more about defining that box?
Well, I call it a creativity in a box. What you do is you create a fiscal box that allows a project to be made. And then you assign writers, directors, producers, actors to work with inside that box. And if you are out of control, you hit the inside of the box, like a flag goes up, and 9 people descend on you and say, maybe you should think about going back in the box. The box could be for Vugaru, a $500,000, $120-minute project for $500,000, which is nothing. Or it could be $75 million for an event movie, or even $125 million. To make a box that's $250 million, you might as well put a weight in it and jump into the Hudson River. You've got to make a fiscal box that is consistent with the business that you're in.
You've been talking a little bit about Tornante and Vugaru, so I'm not sure that everybody here will really know what the difference is between the two. So maybe if you can lay that out for people here.
Well, Tornante is simply a name that came from a bicycle trip in Italy, where I was going down a mountain, and on every corner the word Tornante showed up. So I got a sense that it meant watch out or something like that, or hairpin turn. And when I got to the bottom of the mountain, I had a phone call from my lawyers saying, if you're going to do all these crazy things you're talking about, we need a LLC. What's the name I should? So I looked up and there was the word Tornante. So I said, okay, call it Tornante. So that was the deep research that I did in arriving at the name of my company. And Tornante really is just a shell company from which stuff that I deal. Coming out of Tornante, we bought Topps, the internet card and media company, candy company, and a bunch of other things. Fametown would be an example of it, where we do work. So Vugaru, we decided eventually, and it's happening very quickly, there will be television everywhere. And the Comcasts and the Cablevisions and the Rogers Cable in Canada, they're all trying to figure out what that actually means. And what we felt was, we're not going to worry about what that means. We will make content where the first play is on broadband distribution, digital distribution. So the first thing we did We did a thing called Prom Queen, which was on MySpace. We've done Back on Tops. We have a thing called The Booth. We have a thing called Pretty Tough. All of these different shows. And they're all distributed differently. And internationally, they're distributed not only on the internet, but also on TV and other platforms. But Vugaru, which is a third owned by Rogers Communication in Canada, we brought them in as a partner because they are the definitive Canadian company that is always been, Ted Rogers has always been in the experimental edge. He was the first one in the cell business. He owns television stations, he owns cable companies, he owns all sorts of mobile devices. And so we'll make a show, they'll pay us a certain amount for that show, and then they'll experiment in Canada on all of the different platforms. And then we'll take that experimentation and take it around the world.
You, of course, your name has also been linked publicly with this pursuit of the Tribune Company. So I wonder if you can give us an update on whether there's anything to that and where that stands.
Well, the only thing to it is because when I was writing this book, one of the partners I talked about was John Angelo and Michael Gordon. My grandparents were best friends. Our mothers were best friends. We married roommates. Our children share an office, and our grandchildren go to the same school. And I didn't know one thing about his business. I knew more about the other 18 people. So I decided I would write about John and his partner, Michael Gordon. And they had incredibly well during this downturn. They've done incredibly well all his life. They look for distressed products. And there's another firm out here called Oaktree in California, which is very successful in the same area. And they end up buying the debt of Tribune. So in the course of interviewing these people, I started to learn a lot about debt in the Tribune Company. So I thought, if the book's not successful, at least maybe I'll get successful by buying Tribune debt. So I bought a good amount of Tribune debt for me, and somebody put 2 and 2 together and got it 1. They said, oh, he's bought Tribune debt, he's writing a book about Angelo Gordon, he must be doing something that we don't know. I just bought Tribune debt. I hope they do well. I'm happy to advise them. I'm not moving to Chicago.
Any interest in the LA Times?
Well, man, you mean independently of the rest of the company? Mm-hmm. No, probably not.
You did acquire Topps.
Yes.
Which is a venerable brand that had sort of fallen on hard times. I'm wondering if you can talk about reinventing that to really bring to the 21st century.
Well, I've always been, either in hindsight, mostly in hindsight, but sometimes in front, never go work at a company where there's any danger. I like working in places where you can't fall off the floor. So when I went to ABC, they were 4th among 3. When I went to Paramount, they were 9th among 8. When I went to Disney, there was a certain amount of talk about breaking it apart. And so Andy Redmond, who's sitting over there, who works for me, came into my office one day and said, I'm reading in the Wall Street Journal about this Topps, this 75-year-old company. They have all these dissident shareholders. They're fighting. They went through a bubble in the 90s. Everybody bought cards. Now they don't anymore. There's this big opportunity in Europe with the Bundesliga and the Premier League, soccer. India with the IPL, the cricket league. We can turn it into, I'm giving you 2 months of conversation in 2 minutes. And we can turn it into this great media company, and it's got Bazooka Joe. We're going to make a movie about Bazooka Joe. Bazooka Joe is our new Mickey Mouse. And everybody thinks it's over, so we can't fail. When you say the word Topps to males predominantly, because there have been 2 bubbles, almost every male in America has a nostalgic feel about it. They smell that gum. In the older generation, that hard stick you can't even chew. And the younger generation, they're thinking about they can make enough money to go to college by collecting cards. There's a whole emotion like there was for Disney in '84. So we bought it. And by the way, they're doing great. And we're about to push very heavily into the media business, sports media business, with online, movies, television, to make Topps a more contemporary company. By the way, half of the things I'm telling you will never happen or they will fail. But they're my plans today.
Understood. There are a number of show business companies that are now in that same position of being ninth among 8. Well, are there any that you would see as opportunities for a turnaround where there's a great brand that's ready for someone to step in and reinvent it?
Well, if they come out of bankruptcy with a reasonable financial box, go back to the financial box, of course the answer is yes. But they're so convoluted in their financial structure. They were so over-leveraged. There's so many players out there pontificating about what they should do.
Which, are you talking about a particular company?
No. No.
Nothing with a lion in its logo or anything like that?
Well, they are a real company, and they're run extremely well, and they're the real thing, Lionsgate. But they're not in trouble. Well, they do have a guy there who's messing around, but they're a really good company.
Let's talk about the other lion.
Oh, the other lion. Well, first of all, you have to understand, that's not the MGM library. So it's the United Artists Library. Warner's owns the MGM library. You got to start there. But they have a lot of movies, AIP, Orion movies, United Artists movies, the Bonds and a few things like that. A lot of debt, a lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of mess. Someday, I don't think, it's quite a ways until it really craters in the way that would be attractive.
Do you think that brands, do brands really count for a lot in the movie business? I mean, Disney has a brand, Pixar has a brand. Arguably now the animation companies are building brands. But do consumers really respond to Warner Brothers as a brand, Paramount as a brand, in the same way that they might respond to Topps or to the companies that I mentioned earlier?
No. Star Trek is a brand. Star Wars is a brand. The reason I went to Disney, Disney is a brand. Topps is a brand. We created the brand of Pixar. ESPN is a brand. The LA Times is a brand. It could go either way. The Tribune is a brand. The Orlando Sentinel is a brand. People have if you've lived in LA all your life, the LA Times is part of your DNA. But then again, I'm driving in a car with my son. I asked him what time it was. He didn't have a watch on, so I got annoyed that the watch I gave him for graduation was obviously lost. And he said, "Dad, nobody wears a watch anymore. They don't wear a watch. What are you wearing a watch for? There's the iPad and the BlackBerry." And I'm thinking, if I got out of a shower and didn't put my watch on, I would feel undressed. So are newspapers, those brands, like a watch? I don't know. So a lot of that stuff you have to think about, and if you believe that the LA Times, for instance, is a brand, you better make it as important to my son and his watch as it was to his father lying on a Sunday morning, reading some bad review about a Disney movie.
And watches still survive and thrive, but it seems to me they're really surviving and thriving as jewelry. They still tell time, but they're fashion accessories. Is there an equivalent idea for that for media? Is there any equivalent for that for a media brand where it no longer serves the exact function that it used to before, but it can serve a new function?
I think you're mixing metaphors here. There's no chance that I would go into a watch business. There is no facility for a watch. You might as well buy your wife a pin and not screw around with the watch part of it. What was the rest of your question?
Just can you reinvent a media company in the same way it's a different kind of thing? That is, instead of watches were very utilitarian, they were there to tell time. And at one time were important because if you needed one, it meant your time was valuable. And now you would wear one to some degree to impress people.
No, I'm not interested in that. I mean, if you have a media company that everybody thinks is over, and you make Down and Out in Beverly Hills, it's not over. If you have a media company that's over, or you think is over, and you think Jackass is your big future, I'm not sure that is. It really is the level, even though it did very well, because of the 3D, I guess, and whatever. I think it's about the product that is inside the brand, because the brand itself, if it's a historic brand, then becomes a museum, and then it's over.
Let's talk about some of the technical things that are going to be on the program the rest of the day, because we've got a few minutes. I'd like to see if we can get a few questions in the audience, but not quite yet. One of the things we're hearing a lot about is cord cutting and over-the-top replacing cable potentially. Where do you see over-the-top and cable going in the future? What do you think where do you think this is going?
Well, I wouldn't underestimate Brian Roberts and Comcast and all those companies. And is cord cutting possible? I mean, I was with a person the other day who said he was getting rid of everything, and he was just going to go online to get his stuff. So that's one end. And I think there will be some of that, but I think the cable companies particularly will find a way to maintain their business. Broadcasting may be slightly more difficult. But we all know that when radio came in, everybody thought the movies were over. And when movies came in, everybody thought radio was over. And when pay television came in, everybody thought, this was over. And the sum of all of the parts is greater than it was in the past. But any individual part may be less. So certainly the DVD is going to be substantially less. But pay-per-view and all that kind of stuff is going to be substantially more and a much deeper penetration. So I wouldn't say there will be total cord cutting.
How about mobile? I have to say, I keep waiting for mobile to arrive, and mobile in the sense of apps and things that people do on their smartphones for fun is certainly exploding. The App Store is a cash cow for Apple, and it's becoming so for Google through the Droid system. But mobile television doesn't seem to be getting a lot of traction here in the States.
I think the iPad changed that. I mean, I agree. I don't want to watch Avatar on my flip-top phone. But the iPad is pretty impressive, and that's just the beginning of this next generation of mobile devices. Netflix on the iPad, get an airplane, you watch it on your iPad. You don't need that woman coming down the hall with the giant thing that they hand you. You just have your iPad. We use our iPads to show our Vugu products around the world. They just turn them over and they show them. So I think mobile is definitely here. It's just, what do you have on it? You're not going to replace the big screen 3D movie with mobile. But that doesn't mean it's not a great ancillary market, and in some cases, a primary market.
I want to go to questions in just a moment. There's two things I want to ask real quickly before we do. If you could give a shout out to one thing that the business is doing right and say, keep doing more of that, what would you pick?
Oh, they're doing a lot of things right. There are a lot of terrific stories being done. I mean, you have to realize, in the history of mankind, the greatest works of all time could be put in about 5 books. And this town and this industry puts out an enormous volume of intellectual product. And a lot of it is unbelievable. Yes, we lament on a weekend that opens when there are 5 terrible movies. But a weekend may open when there are 5 great movies. Or there may be on HBO some great series as there is now. Or there may be something on a platform you've never heard of that all of a sudden creates Mad Men and AMC becomes relevant. What this country does well, and better than anywhere in the world, is develop, create, innovate, not only technology, but story-driven, emotionally substantial products. And at any one time you can complain that there are not enough around, but go to the Academy Awards, look at the documentaries, look at documentaries like Spellbound or any of these things. It's unbelievable what we are delivering to this country particularly, and this city particularly, to the world community in the sense of entertainment, information. So all of lamenting about 3D, not 3D, should you have glasses, cutting the cord, mobile, what is Steve Jobs up to? What is Carl Icahn going to do? Who's going to screw up this? That's all in the air, rightly so. But we should all, once in a while, look at the really great stuff that's done.
And I'll flip that around. if you could pick one thing that the business is doing wrong that you'd like to see changed, what would you pick?
Well, not liking enough of my ideas probably would be the, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you know, you could have the greatest parade, the greatest picnic ever, and there are going to be people that say the orange juice was a little too red. You know, who knows? We tend to be big critics, but I don't think it's awful. The trade of American product is enhanced by what we ship from this country all around the world. The ideas generally, democratic ideas, as hard as they are to articulate, are generally shipped around the world from this town. Some of those things are pretty awesome, which we don't often give ourselves credit for. A failure of a Windows phone and pages on Steve Ballmer having to worry about the next phone, is he going to make it? Yeah, that's fun to read, but is that really the substantive thing? I don't know.
Let's go to questions from the audience. Do we have a microphone? I don't know if we have one out here. I know my colleague Mark Grazer is out here. Mark, did you have a question? I can't see. All right, any questions? We can go for more.
Hi. I was curious to know that despite all the options for viewing programs and enjoying content the way you've outlined very helpfully, there's still an awful lot of commerce that's dependent upon a mass audience, and especially launching new mass consumer products. Do you think that there's a need and even a way to keep large audiences like we're used to from the broadcast networks together going forward?
It's harder. I mean, we still have football, and we still have national events, both positive and tragic. So the things do come together nationally less often. You don't sit and watch Monday night I Love Lucy, 100 million people. But you do get a mass audience in a way in that it keeps coming back. It's shown on many platforms. It's part of the culture. You still have consumer products